You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't.
That's right. It's just what you need and not what you don't. Thanks for tuning in.
The only station that matters.
That's right, folks. Yeah, I just got up not too long ago and poured myself a little bit of Diet Cola, the original. I mean, not one of the top 2 old brands from days of yore. Not that.
Here's what's happening.
So it's Monday, May 10th. Yeah, it feels like March or February where I am. And I do have a thing here that's going, if I can find the darn thing. As always, a little bit of things are unorganized here, as usual. Well, anyway, the weather here feels like February or March. I just had the NOAA radio on, the green thing there, the $35 NOAA radio that also has a flashlight on it and a charge your cell phone and solar charges itself and all that jazz. And of course, I'm powering some things with the old Jackery there. And we've got the fireplace on today because it is freezing. It was 36 degrees in the overnight. And now they're talking about mid-30s for the next 3 nights. This is May. I'm not gonna like hound or harp on this for too much, but just a wake-up call. In fact, I have to put it in my 2021 planting record while I talk to you. You're listening to here.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
So the beginning of the show, sometimes, as much as I think I'm organized, I always, I'm always one step behind sometimes. But anyway. So we're talking about frost warnings. May 10, 11, 12. And what's really sad is that I was out in the yard yesterday just for a brief moment. I ended up having a happy hour. My kitchen bar. I'll show you a picture. If it wants to. Well, I didn't want to push that button. Low power mode. Geez, I only have 26%. I got to charge my phone. Let's see. I don't know which one looks better. Well, here's before it all began. No. I was listening to music using my phone, so I guess I'll show this one. Let's see if we can get an angle on that. That makes sense. Can you see that? That the reflection, there's always a reflection. Something always going to reflect. That's my kitchen bar. There's a candle, a glass ashtray, if you're wondering what that thing in the middle is. And I was drinking some stuff called Cayman Jack. It's like a margarita, one of these beer type of things. I guess I'll plug this in. Hopefully this won't drain bandwidth or something from the broadcast. So,
Your papers, please.
I don't have any papers.
I am your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man.
So if you looked at the title card today. It's got some bunch of people from an old like magazine advertisement for fondue, right? Did you get your morning show mug yet? And you know fondue is, right? Just melted. It's this thing that melts cheese or chocolate. It basically it's just a thing you put on your table, and they have these little forks so people gather around, and you could like dip in little things, and it melted cheese covers them, and you eat it. Or you could, I guess you could dip a strawberry in it if you put chocolate in there or something like that too. So when you're drinking a few beers, smoking a couple of cheap cigars, but at least they were fresh, you get thoughts. I was listening to music. Actually, because I have a great music collection, 10,000 songs. I wish I could share it with you. But YouTube doesn't pay its royalties for it's one of those other things that these social media companies skirt around. And they get away with it, nobody questions them. I mean, why? See, I'm a songwriter who's registered through BMI, right? So that, in other words, my songs, if they're played on the radio, should get royalties or any kind of broadcast media. Even in a bar, technically, they if someone plays it, they even if they cover it, supposedly, I don't know all the details, but so somehow, and I'm not sure how they skirt around it, but I'm sure it's some kind of little legalese thing in their terms of service that Congress was lobbied on and just looks the other way, right? And there is no ACLU or anything like that to challenge these companies because they're afraid of them. See, they're afraid. See, it's they really, when I say an organized crime syndicate is running the world and running the former United States, people like, oh, well, you're crazy. It's like, no, this is an organized crime syndicate. Big tech is part of an organized crime syndicate. And of course, so is Big Pharma and the litany of other ones I always talk about. And they use organized crime tactics, intimidation, extortion, right? Threats, and who knows what else, right? Remember, we're talking about multi-billionaires, and, they make it clear to us on a daily basis that we're nothing more than this. We're just cattle on their little farms. And you know how a farmer feels about cattle. It's either productive or it's sent to the slaughterhouse. Or its productivity sometimes may be to go to the slaughterhouse. So, yeah, that's where, I'm really saying that, and I really believe that. Life is very cheap to people who have billions of dollars and who are narcissistic sociopaths, some psychopaths. And it's very clear that they are. But before we get into some kind of rant, let's do the normal review of, for those who may be watching this on a TV or a device that they can't, like there isn't a thing like here that says show more. So I'm going to read you the description. The title of this show is These Are the Good Old Days. And I kind of chose the smiley face in the fondue ad as a title card or meme, throwing us back to the 70s because Carly Simon, I think, had a song out in the 70s, These Are the Good Old Days. I don't know if anyone remembers that or not. And then in the description, it says, I often say that perception is reality. The way you perceive reality can either be controlled by external forces like conditioning or social engineering, or you can experience the world the way you want by using your consciousness to define your reality. You get that? So it's either, excuse me, it's a signature of Tony Caravan Live. So let's get into it. I like that. It helps. I don't really have a hangover, but I didn't sleep well last night because there's this dog a couple of houses down that when the weather's warm, it has like kind of an outdoor pen. Now, I don't know what these people are up to. Like, I don't know if they breed dogs, fight dogs. I don't know what the deal is. Excuse me, my nose is itchy. But they also have like this thing that was a garage. These people bought this house for like $20,000. The people who were selling it, they had it up to like $40,000 before, which was still a deal. It's a corner house, two or three stories, new siding, brand new metal roof. The only thing inside would have required is maybe there was some old wallpaper, things like that. Maybe peel some wallpaper, mud and tape, or just a bunch of paint and sand down the floors. Well, anyway, the house ended up selling for $20,000, and these guys moved in there. A couple of guys, I think. And in the back was this like kind of garage that was looked more like a stable, but it wasn't big. It's not big. The house is decent size. But that's why I say in this neighborhood, you could still buy a house for 20 grand. Like a multi-family house for 20 grand. A supermarket, restaurants, cars, a doctor's office, dentist, and stuff like that. Imagine in a town that's, it's the outskirts of town, but I mean, there's mass transportation and all that jazz. So it's pretty crazy. This nose is like crazy. I don't know why it's itchy. I'm sorry about that. They got a dog in that. Somebody's talented painting. I mean, they painted this wild mural of sorts on this, mini barnish, small mini garage-y type of thing, and put a door on it instead of like a barn door things or whatever. And I guess they keep the dog in there, which makes me think it's not like a pet. It's more of some kind of functional thing. And I'm not going to get mixed up, in, like I say, you got to live and let live, even if you have concerns about something, especially these times, you can't trust people, so I don't know what's going on down there. It may be innocent. So I'm not a nosy person. So I can't, I don't know what to do. All I know is this dog barked all last night because it was in this thing, and I'm sure the thing's not heated. It was like 36 degrees, and I'm sure the dog was like freezing. Cold and lonely. It sounds sad. It is sad. And it kept waking me up all night long. Of course, I got up at 4 o'clock, 4:30, downstairs before 5. It's 6:24 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the former United States. And That's and that's all there is about that. So I don't know why I got into that, but this idea that I wanted to talk about, these are the good old days, is what I really. And I guess despite even, having to deal with nonsense like that, like a dog barking in the middle of the night, I'm still better off than around the world. And I was talking about those. Yesterday was Mother's Day. I talked to my mother on the phone because she's in Florida, and they're basically in, despite what you hear on the news, like she's in a managed, it's like a managed care facility. She has her own apartment, but it's like, they have like a dining or restaurant. It's actually like a restaurant. It's an interesting place. They have their own apartments, refrigerator and stuff like that. But they have this restaurant that, with the chef and stuff serves them. I mean, it's not really super, but it's better than most, put it this way. And they have people that, like a maid service. So once a week, somebody comes in and cleans the apartment, and they don't have, and gives them the things they need, replaces the basics. But you still can't get in that place. They're still kind of locked down, more or less. But I was talking to her about something I talked to you folks about when I was a kid. Public swimming pools. And, and dances and stuff like that. And how that stuff, and that's what, made me, and then it got me thinking more towards the 70s culture, which was really probably one of the best times in probably the 50s, like right after the war, the post World War II, leading into the 50s, before the Korean War. Like my dad was in the Korean War. And of course, then it jumped into the Vietnam War. But when the Vietnam War ended in 1974, there was no that end was started to wind. You knew it was going to end. Remember, the civil rights movement was over now. The feminist movement was over. The war was over, right? Because that was the unrest, the big issue of the day, protests and Kent State. And Woodstock was over. It was, Summer of Love had passed. And so you entered this period of time where there was no war. The civil rights movement ended successfully. And it was just like everyone was just having fun, right? It was like you were free. And a lot of people don't focus on that. So, sometimes they've made a few movies and stuff like that, but they really don't focus on the concept of that. What kind of sigh of relief it was in the mid 70s going into the 80s. And then the corporatocracy started to take control of the country by the mid 80s. But there was about a decade. When I say decade, I don't mean a chronological decade. I mean, like, say, 75 to 85, say, or something like that. Or at least 75 into the early 80s. That it was just fun. But the same thing was like after the war, World War II. The war was over. You had like the GI Bill and stuff, and people were getting, and you had, these neighborhoods. So the average person, a soldier, came back and got married, or families, and they were able to buy a house in a neighborhood with a garage, have a car, a refrigerator. These things like might not sound like much to some people, but it's a big deal. Washer and dryer, big deal. Big deal for an individual to have their own house with their little lawn, their car, washer, dryer, a kitchen. Yes, you had a housewife in those days for the most part, many of whom, there was a song in the 70s, who married young and then retired and actually looked at it that way. Like, hey, this is great, man. I'll raise a family. And they liked it. They liked the idea of hanging out at the house, even though it was a rough, tough job being a housewife. It's a lot of work keeping house. I know that myself because I live alone and I have my own house. And man, I'm way behind on a lot of things. I need to clean this place from top to bottom. It's like well overdue. It's like I try to keep everything clean, the primary areas I use, but I really need to go through it. It's tough. It's hard work. But anyway, so those 2 periods of time, and one could say throughout. So, some people were lucky, if you weren't caught up in like the anti-war type of person or civil rights, or if you were a kid, you weren't going to war. That period post-war, World War II, straight through into the 80s, right? So several decades in a row, the 50s, 60s, 70s. That was a time in America that was really, that was something else, and that's why all the music was like, if you listen to oldies, it was all music about love, and that kind of stuff, and good times and party, and it was happy. That's why I put the smiley faces in the background on the title card. And people were doing goofy things like having fondue parties, or people played board games and stuff like that. And they got together. There was a lot of drinking going on too. That was a big deal too. But it was drinking for fun. It wasn't like abusive. It was happy. It was happy drinking. A party, in the true sense of a party, And so, Carly Simon had a song, because even back then, there have always been people who always talked about the good old days. And so even in those days, grandparents, people would reminisce about something in the past and say, those good old days. But, anybody in that time that I just described, they would talk about, say, the good old days of the 1930s or 20s. That's romanticizing selective memory, romanticizing, because, a lot of people had outhouses, okay, ice boxes, not refrigerators, ringer washers, right? You know what a ringer washer is? Yeah. And other people still had, hand washing clothes. Most people put their clothes out on the line to dry. So it was, coal. Well, when I was a kid, we shoveled coal. We had a coal furnace. And I had to shovel coal into the coal bin and then take the ashes out once a week. And a truck picked up the ashes. Yeah. So the idea is that, you could romanticize, have selective memory about a particular time and romanticize about it. But, Carly Simon was right about the 70s when she said, these are the good old days, whoever wrote that song, if it was her or somebody else. And when I say now, these are the good old days, well, they don't compare to that period in the 70s or post-war period by any means, because of the drastic changes that really happened at that time. And literally you went from outhouse to, having a neighborhood, right? Excuse me. I know it's hard to put up with me, but it's worth it. These are good discussions, I think. I watch them back. I enjoy them. Very few out of all my shows. We're coming up on the 100 mark where I'm going to give you all who have taken this curriculum, this course. I'm going to give you a doctorate degree, PhD, in 21st century I forget what I was going to call it exactly. I have it written down here. I haven't made it yet. It's on my list. Just like me to lose it. No, let's see. Here we go. A degree in 21st century human behavior from Rockflux and Tony Caravan Live. That was hidden by a little note I had that I needed to get an extension cord and a night light. Because the on-air light, that's what's in there, is a night light I'm using to light it, but it's not bright enough. So I need to either find some kind of nice LED light that'll fit in that thing, or like 2 night lights and one of those power extension things. I'm powering it through this Jackery. So it's not plugged into the wall. It's just plugged into saved power, which is solar chargeable or whatever. Breathing, trouble breathing. So, yeah, so those people, those were the good old days. But and I was thinking about it, and that's why I wrote in this thing here, if we look at this again, in this description, that when I say perception is reality, but the way you perceive reality could either be controlled by external forces, the social engineering I keep talking about, or you can experience the world the way you want to using your consciousness to define your reality. And consciousness being out of like my book Codex, this idea of the you, the first person you, the way you perceive the world, the hard problem of consciousness, as they talk about, that basically is that it's, you've got your bioelectric brain here inside your skull. And I call that even your subconscious, because it's like being a subhuman if you allow your subconscious to rule your life. And then you have your consciousness or your soul, that's its spiritual aspect of life. And it's a matter of, and life is about experiencing. So you experience through your senses, but it's your consciousness that really experiences life. Not this thing, this body, this vessel, this android, intelligently designed machine, whatever you want to call it, is strictly that. It's just a vessel for your consciousness. And so as a conscious being, the mind The mind is not the brain. The mind is separate from the brain. Consciousness is separate from the brain. That's called the hard problem of consciousness that even science deals with right now. And my book deals with that. And so all of these, I get into these long rants about how this corporatocracy, the technocracy, big tech et al., this organized crime syndicate is manipulating, controlling the world, indoctrinating, conditioning, and doing all that stuff and propagandizing. And all that's true. But all that said, that's for their effort to control you and the way you control your reality. So if you are if you're a cow, if you're cattle and you are fenced in, you're fed a certain time of day, you're conditioned to do something. Your reality is controlled. You don't know. It's like one time my cat doesn't like to go outside. It used to. Like I lived in one place and it would once a couple times it would just get out, and one time I thought it just ran away, but it came back like 2 hours later, an hour or so later. And so when I got this place, I have a fenced in yard when I first got this. And so I didn't really care if the cat went out in the yard. I spend most of my time out in the yard, so I just assume that the cat come out and hang out, because otherwise it would look at me through a screen open that faces the back end, because I have a long, thin yard. But I spend most of my time way down the end of the yard, because that's where I have a workshop, a little patio, a little mini greenhouse and stuff like that. The YouTube thing just popped up. And so one time, this is kind of just an odd thing. So at that time, the cat used to go out. And so one time it ran, I noticed it went all the way to the end of the yard to where there's an alley, back alley. And it was looking there, and it was sitting there, and it was just trying to look beyond. And I was thinking about it, and it was almost had this image and this thought that the cat was looking at the end of the world. I mean, not the end of the world, but I mean the edge of the world, I should say, of its world. That was just an interesting concept. But I think once or twice, I think the cat got fleas or something like that. And somehow it put 2 and 2 together. And that was a pain getting rid of those, but I did. It just has no desire to go out, even when I'm out there. And so I'll open the back window that faces where I usually work, and I'll find the cat sitting in the window watching, just watching me and I guess the birds and stuff. But it has no desire to go out anymore. And so it's conditioned, its world is, it has defined, it made a decision. It's defined its world. And originally the yard was its parameters. The fence was like the cattle there. And then there was this place beyond that it looked through the fence, like a cow will look through a greener pasture or something like that, maybe. Or people sometimes think the grass is greener on the other side or something like that, whatever that expression is. And what I'm trying to say is the whole thing is your perception. And perception is something that they can control. They can social engineer and condition. And they do that with children. It's, it's the school system. It's like an indoctrination system. And you have to be, I've always been immune to their indoctrination and conditioning. And I can't explain why that is. It's just something the way I am. And it's not like I've got plenty of flaws and stuff. But one thing I don't is like when I hear these lies and these outrageous statements and, you know, all kinds of pronouncements that aren't based in fact. It's the same with like this, this global warming thing they're still pushing. It's like we have the next 3 days we've got frost advisory in May. And last year we had frost in May. And the year before, like I said, spring was March. The earth is cooling. There's people in Florida, they say, oh, look how hot it is. Florida's always been hot, muggy, and humid. I lived in Florida for over a year. And one of the reasons I moved away, it was just hot. You couldn't even, So it's like, this is the way it is. If you don't like hot weather, don't move to Florida. That's not global warming. That's Florida. That's why they have palm trees. It's tropical. People are so crazy. And then they see stuff like this. It's like, I don't know. Do they like this morning? I intentionally opened my front door and put my head out. I'll go out in the backyard and feed the birds after this, and then later today I have to scrounge up some burlap or whatever I can and cover my my plants for the overnight. It's a real hassle too, because I think there's supposed to be some sun this afternoon, and I'd like these plants to get as much sun in the ground, to get as much sun as possible. But I get up at like 4 a.m. So, usually by 4 p.m. or 6 p.m., I'm kind of like upstairs, dressed for bed kind of thing. Sounds crazy, but I mean, that's my, if you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, by 6 o'clock, it's 14 hours, 7 o'clock, it's, you're talking, you've been up 15, 16 hours. Well, you want to get 8 hours sleep by 7, you need to be in bed or get ready for bed or get comfortable. So it's like, I got to like stay dressed and, for until what? 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock tonight, so I could get maximum sun on my garden and then go out and do this thing. Try covering these things up. It's just, I don't know. This is a real hassle. And the idea that they're pretending, that there's some kind of global warming nonsense is just, I had the NOAA radio on while I was setting all this stuff up. Believe it, this takes a lot to set up every day. It's probably like an hour almost of prep. And that has nothing to do with what I'm speaking about. I just wing this. This is flow of consciousness. I come up with the concept, an idea. The idea was, these are the good old days. And that's my point of departure. No, I mean, making the title card, setting up the live stream, putting in the description, getting these things, on this side here.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Setting up the audio computer, I've got headphones on, the microphone set up. I've got to get my drinks organized, and I don't know if you can see that ice cube and my caffeine, and then the fireplace and all these little various electronic devices. So it takes work. You know. And so I have to do all that stuff, and it's like, so I'm listening to this thing, and it's telling me that there's frost advisories for the next 3 nights. And like I said, I don't live in the Northeast. I'm more south. I'm closer to the Mason-Dixon line, put it that way, than I am to the Canadian border. This is like the considered mid-Atlantic states, maybe Ohio Valley along where the Appalachian Trail comes through. That's where I'm situated, in that area. But I'm not up in the mountains at higher altitude. So there's no reason, this is normally what I call a full season zone. In other words, full fall, winter, spring, and summer. But lately it's been like short summer, barely any fall, big long winter, and it really short, and really no spring at all. A couple of days, and those are the ones where they'll go, oh look, see, it's global warming. Like if you get a couple days where it gets up to 70 or 80 or something before June when summer hits. I mean, it's May 10th, summer begins in the month and it's freezing. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I don't care if we have you get a few warm days here or there. That doesn't count. That's the same with the fall. You get a couple days that seems like fall weather. You go, oh, this is a nice fall day, or something. Yeah, it's a nice fall day, but it's not fall season, the way it used to be. So in that certainly these are not the good old days. Okay, so I'm clarifying that. And all this stuff with the plague and all the lies and all the corporatocracy and craziness and me calling this the former United States and the organized crime syndicate, that's not the good old days. But the idea is to live, one of my other notes from yesterday was to live a full life. And so despite all of this insanity, and it is insanity. I mean, you could look at it this way. This could be what's going on.
This is a nightmare. Must be a nightmare.
That's one way of looking at life right now. That it's a nightmare. A surrealistic nightmare, in fact. Or you can do what I did and work to simplify your life, which it's not like flipping a switch. You have to do some planning. You got to figure out your costs and make a plan. Escape, get away, move to the outskirts of town or move somewhere else. Or simplify your life in such a way that you cut your expenses way down. So you reduce the amount of stress on yourself and you can live a full life, a real life. And then perception becomes reality, but the reality is controlled by your consciousness, by you, the you. That when I say consciousness, I mean you in the first person, the way you perceive the world, not the way your subconscious, which is always working against you. Psychiatrists will call that like self-sabotage. That's like a real common thing. People like self-sabotage themselves, subconsciously, and the subconscious is the thing. That's what advertising uses. That's what propagandists use. That's what the indoctrinations, that's what all these administration people I talk to about in the school system that never existed back in those other good old days when you just had a principal, right? And a janitor, football coach, and a couple office ladies, right? And the greatest, all of this stuff that you see, this technology came from those of us who grew up in that era. It didn't come from the people who are like working for Facebook or Google or stuff, right? These are Johnny come latelys. We handed them the internet. They didn't invent the internet, right? That came from people who went to school that did not have indoctrination or an administration building, right? In 1957, there was a epidemic that killed like hundreds, thousands of people in the U.S. It was a flu bug. And you never even heard about that. It happened. And, that was it. And since then, flus have come and gone. Your H1N1s and different things. And some years, it's been, there's always like, 60,000, 100,000, people dying. And then there's always these people dying from pneumonia, influenza, and other things that they push that they, attribute to this most recent thing. Diabetes is if you go to the CDC website, I don't want to harp on this thing either. You look at leading causes of death. And if you really put them together, you'll see that all the things they talked about in the outset originally, a year or so ago, over a year ago now, people who were pre-existing conditions, they talked about people with diabetes, people with certain heart, respiratory problems, things like that, at the elderly, extremely old age. People who, the average age of people who died from this thing is the average age when people die. I mean, that's a pretty profound statement to make, but that's a true statement. In other words, the average age that people who died from this is the average age that people naturally die. In other words, it's the mortality, thing. So whatever you want to believe about that, that's fine. I'm not going to get into that either. It's like, I'm not into that or politics. And I know those are two of the big forefront of everything now. That and these active shooter events and stuff like that go on that they manage to use as content. Like they don't really care because there's 19,000 homicides a year. I'm sorry, I can't talk today. I'm really apologize for this. What can I say? What can I say?
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
You got to take the bitter with the sweet. But perception is reality. So you can either go with the subconscious, what they want you to believe, to obsess over, to be afraid of, to way you live your life, despite the fact that 99+% of the people in this country did not die from this thing, nor will they. Okay. That's another big statement. And that the average age of the person that did was the average age that a person that is an average age of the person will die. And that these people when you combine all these so-called pre-existing conditions together and look at the CDC leading causes of death, you will find that they all kind of tally to about the same amount of people. But it's like I say, figures lie and liars figure. It's the way the news media and the politicians, presented this to you, because now they've got $1 trillion industry based on this thing. because the corporatocracy, it's an organized crime syndicate. They're just in it for money and power. All right. The leading cause of death in this country still is heart disease, by far more than the plague. The second leading cause of death in this country every year is still cancer. And the FDA, right, isn't doing anything. Nobody's coming out. There's no White House task force holding weekly meetings about cancer or heart disease. Instead, when they locked down people last year and people still under lockdown, guess what? You could still get artery clogging, cancer causing foods. That's what you can get. Yesterday, I got a delivery. There's some new place. I don't want to give the name of it because I don't promote anything. But I did it out of curiosity because it had some different places and it was free delivery. And I don't know if it was free delivery just because it was the first time I used it. It's like everything else, you get an app. But it's one of the places, though, this is unique about this place, is that it allowed me to, you can order fresh produce and you get delivery within several hours. So I was sitting at the bar in my house, my own bar, drinking, and I think I got an email, and this is one of those few times, or I got the email earlier or something like that. And I thought, you know what? I don't really have anything in here. I'm drinking now. And probably when I'm done drinking, I'm going to feel like wanting, to have something to eat. And I don't feel like preparing a meal. I want something I could just throw in the microwave or just eat as is. I thought, well, maybe I'll try that thing. And so I went on and I looked, and here's the thing, you can get lettuce, and I did. And so I spent about 30 some bucks just to try it out. Cause I think it was $35, you get free delivery. So I spent like 35, whatever. And you give the driver, you can tip. They just left it at my front door. I didn't even see the person. Right. And though I did get a note. They were like an hour or two late, which was fine because I was just hanging out at my bar, listening to music and drinking and stuff. And I was talking to my mom on the phone for a little while. So I didn't care. They were late. But you can get like a head of lettuce and onions and, whatever you want, a steak. So unlike ordering from like Amazon or Walmart or some of these other places, though I know Walmart has some kind of food thing in some areas, but this was interesting. So, and the stuff came, like I said, it was a little late. I didn't care, but it was like very convenient. And, see, that's where they're heading with this stuff. That's why I say, there's going to be jobs of these drivers, right? But, who knows? Eventually that might be their whole, I don't buy into this self-driving car thing, but I know that's their plan. They have this crazy dream. It's like Elon Musk's, wild imagination, his sci-fi dreams. The guy, he's done some good things. He's obviously he's a very intelligent man, but his vision of the future is like the Jetsons' vision of the future. It's almost as bad as the 60s World's Fair, video phones and flying cars. It's just not the way it turned out. Even with all this Zoom and FaceTime and all that stuff, it's not really used as much as it is. We never really got, people are, it's just a weird thing. And flying cars are just never going to happen. Anybody who's ever driven in any major market and seen the congestion there, imagine what would be going on when these, 47,000 people die in car accidents. Or 30,000, I don't know, die in it. I don't know how many accidents there are. They're probably in hundreds of thousands, right? we could check that out. I don't want to talk about how many car accidents per year. Let's see. 6 million car accidents in the U.S. every year. That's roughly 16,438 per day. Of these, 22,471 caused property damage. Over 37,000 Americans die in automobile crashes per year. Think about that. 6 million accidents, 37,000 die. 47,000 commit suicide, right? 650,000 die of heart disease. 600,000 die of cancer. And the list goes on with diabetes and influenza, pneumonia. Like I say, you tally all this stuff up. So you're never going to be flying cars. There's just 6 million car accidents now on the ground. Could you imagine moving that up into the sky and these things falling down and then on people? So some of these ideas just don't fly. And it's the same goes with the cars, self-driving cars. I did a video, self-driving cars. If you could find that, there's a cartoon of a car, image. You want to find the one that's the cartoon one that I, talk about it. I don't think I have that. I may or may not have that on here. Let's see. Actually, I do. Let's listen to a couple seconds of it. I've written so many songs. I've written a song about everything. It's kind of a distorted thing.
I see self-driving cars are coming out, I guess so people can text and drive or update their status. What a waste of time. It's funny how they don't see that the natural evolution will be back to mass transportation, so why squander the time in between? People have lost their humanity. There's no empathy. The goal should be less work, less driving, and more living.
Anyway, you get the idea. Self-driving cars, another one of Tony Caravan songs. Beat poetry, but you could see how I use different, sometimes it's like a hard, distorted guitar in the background. Sometimes it's a jazz, stand-up bass. Sometimes it's just whatever. I just mess around with everything. But no, there won't be self-driving cars. So, but the idea is there'll be less jobs. But that's their vision. They have this vision of like getting rid of the Teamsters union, for example, with trucks. And so on the highways, you'll have all these, self-driving 18-wheelers. And then, and then these delivery vehicles, and then the drones. They're already doing that in, out in Amazon land out west, where the drones will deliver your package right to your front door. They have fleets of these things. So, but a lot of this stuff is just, I don't know, it's unrealistic on a grand scale. And that's why they really wanted to have, that's what the Agenda 21, and then they changed it to Agenda 2030, and now it's the Great Reset is all about. Their idea was trying to keep everybody into these, megalopolises, or whatever you want to call them, these big city centers, so that they could have centralized control of everything. Because it would work within a small environment like that, a closed-in area. But when people are out all over the place, it doesn't work. That's why the Postal Service hasn't had a profit. because it's not, delivering within the city, is easy. A short distance from a post office to a location. It's fine if it's, but when you have to go out rural delivery, that's where they lose money because they've got to drive out some country road. It's gas expenditures. I don't care if it's electric car or whatever it is. The point is that person's got to delivery person spends more time. And that's why the post office, and what some people have, this is just a quick aside, but what Amazon, who basically is profited on the post office, has done is they've taken advantage of this network that the U.S. Postal Service has developed over, decades. And they use that, and they get free use of that. Like I sent a small package. I think I showed this in a previous video, so I'm not going to put one together. A postal box that's about this thin, literally. And maybe if you remember what a VCR looks like, but like literally small, about the size of an old VCR tape, right? Video cassette tape. Cost $8 and change to send. My son was send something down to my mom. For Mother's Day. Just wanted to send her a little thing, card and a couple, some stuff. And it was like $8.34. I think something like that for this tiny little box. But Amazon, you get free delivery of like a 40-pound item, right? And they're not paying the post office that same rate. But let's get back to, the second half of the show. Let's deal with this thing. So when I say these are the good old days, and the reason I was talking about perception is reality, is that you have to, if you want to live a full life under these conditions, despite this social engineering and all the nonsense they're doing, despite the organized crime syndicate and everything else, and whatever folly these people want to try to unleash, right? You detach yourself the best you can. In other words, that means, it means what it means. Detach yourself as much as possible from the corporatocracy, this technocracy, but without depriving yourself of your quality of life. And you can do that and take advantage of the things that they've put in place to your benefit, but don't get caught up in, get caught into this, wormhole that they've created that they're trying to pull you into. So in other words, like I say, I intentionally live below the poverty line. Now people freak out when they hear that. But I bought a house. I planned this. I bought a house, a cheap house. It's not perfect, but it's a house in a neighborhood and it's fine. Like I said, I live alone with a cat, but if I had a family, it's big enough, right? So that's not a problem. If I had kids or something like that, there's the school bus I see picks up kids in the neighborhood right across the street from me. Right. And like I say, I walk to the grocery store and there's a doctor's office next door. And this house was less than $20,000. My taxes, mortgage, insurance are under $200 a month. So that's just me. But I'm saying, there's some people living in homes that are, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars and up. And they have high taxes as well. And of course, your insurance on a house like that's going to be, high, just as high. And the idea is, do you need all of that? Oh, we have a good school district. They're all the same. They're all indoctrinating the kids. It's like the kids who go to school from this neighborhood they closed down. There used to be a school, like there's this, I don't know how to describe it, but maybe about 10 or 12 blocks from me, back behind me, into the areas where I don't go necessarily, deep into the neighborhood-ish. They've got like a Dollar Tree and a thing called the Save a Lot and something like that, a little plaza. And next to it was one of those big brick stone schools, beautiful building. And it was like a grade school. Probably at one time it was, grades first through 8, because that's how it used to be before they made middle schools and all that stuff. But it was still being used, and looks like there's an attached gymnasium that's a newer building. Well, a couple of years ago, so all the neighborhood kids, that was their school. That's a big place too. And like I say, it's this brick building that obviously over the years was taken care of, Well, a couple of years ago, they just basically closed it down, and they're busing those kids to, the central school, whatever. So what I'm trying to say is that, no matter where you go, you're going to the schools, I'm not talking about living in some ghetto environment type of thing, inner city Baltimore or Chicago, right? The Bronx, South Central Philly or North Philadelphia. I mean, I've been around, I've seen some pretty gnarly places. And that's what I'm not recommending, moving to. And it's too bad that these organizations that collect all this money from people, that they don't focus on those areas and cleaning them up. That just shows how they don't care and why they're narcissistic sociopaths. Because they have no conscience or empathy. Because if they really cared, we wouldn't have those neighborhoods in Baltimore that are, just burned out neighborhoods. Just wouldn't be there. Like I said, what I would do if I were one of those groups, I'd buy up two of the worst blocks in Baltimore. Most of those places are uninhabited anyway, right? I'd buy up 2 blocks and I'd get architectures, good architects from, and minority based business contractors and all that. And I'd build some kind of grand structure, community type of center in like the roughest part of town. And I'd turn it into some kind of like, futuristic, really cool place with stuff to do. I mean, that's what you do, and that's not gentrification, because would be community. That's where I would house the offices of these organizations, ones I'm talking about that have made money. And instead the owners, the people who are in charge of these things, are buying $1 million homes, right? Well, instead of buying $1 million homes, why don't you buy up some neighborhood, bad neighborhoods in Chicago, Baltimore, DC, New York, Atlanta, right? Why don't you buy up a whole neighborhood there and turn them into community and cultural centers for people, right? That kind of thing. Combination, places where people could learn trades, community centers, daycare centers, cultural centers, arts, right? All kinds of things for people. And even have like a little mallish type things, where people could have inexpensive little shops, that offer things, so people the poor can have a place where they can sell their wares, or have a little, whatever, donut shop, pizza shop, sell their cookies. Clean up the community by providing a service that that community is not being served with, and getting rid of the worst parts of a community. See, that's what, if people really cared, if they had empathy, that's what they would do. But anyway, let's not talk about that, because they're not going to do that. And that's not being done. We're heading towards dystopia in those areas, or dystopia already exists there. What I'm trying to say is these are the good old days. There's all kinds of noises going on outside. And it's daylight. 7:20 a.m. I usually do these shows, and it's usually by the time they're over, it's still dark. But no, you can live your life. You have to decide, your quality of life. And that you is your consciousness. It's not the subconsciousness. Yeah, I'm trying to hold back a belch because I'm drinking carbonated beverage in the morning. Between that and trying to clear my throat, I know it's annoying. Sorry. But let's take case in point myself. All right. Because that's why I do these shows. Like I said, I don't make any money on it. It'd be nice if you'd buy my book or get my CD, wherever that thing is, or some of these devices. But nobody's done it. We're coming up on 100 consecutive live shows. Not a single person bought a morning show mug, right? Or went to greatsolarstuff.com or bought my book or listening to my songs on Spotify or anything. I don't get money from YouTube. I'm not monetized. So no, it costs, like I say, it costs me time and money to do these things. And I'm doing it to share with you. I feel that that's one of the other things in life is, service to others, believe it or not, like it or not, whether you want to believe me or not. So I tell you these things for a reason. I'm using myself as an experiment. That's why I have 10 books. That's what my songs are about. And some of these videos are crazy and zany and it's fun. And some of them are kind of real, real serious. But you can't take anything too seriously. So if you want to, these can be the good old days for you. Technically for me, I'm yesterday I had fun. I had total fun. So I'm living below the poverty line. And I'm sitting in my kitchen, which instead of having people are concerned with having, because I'm a confirmed bachelor at this point. I was married twice, had, I don't know, I had a bunch of longer term relationships with different women. And I'm just that's not my number one priority right now, is that the relationship thing. For some people, everybody's got priorities. It's one time that's all I thought about. That was I was obsessed with it. Obsessed with having a girlfriend. Right. And then eventually I just realized, after my going through a year of operations, probably also, but hey, that blonde that I was watching on this Criminal Minds, I'm up to see episode that I'm binge watching before I go to bed. This show Criminal Minds on Netflix. The blonde came back, she was off the show, and she's hot. I just love looking at her. Yeah. Anyway, just that. So No, but I mean, I don't have an island in my kitchen. I have a bar. I just decided to build a bar. So I've got speakers, really good, like Bose speakers, in this on the ceiling or on the walls. I've got a music collection of like 10,000 songs and various playlists. So, and I have enough money to basically, I don't have to, I'm not drinking rot gut alcohol. Like I say, yesterday I had this stuff, this Cayman Jack margaritas, and then I had some I had some Bud Light limes because that was a natural follow up to that, you know. And I put like some margarita salt around the rim of my chilled glass and sliced fresh lime in the glass and poured in the Bud Light lime. It's a pretty interesting, it's kind of it's not as margarita tasting as the Cayman Jack thing, but it's a way of, it's an interesting thing. I experiment with stuff like that all the time. What I'm saying is I spent about 4 or 5 hours at the bar, my own bar. And then I had stuff delivered, and one of them was like, some kind of pizza thing or something delivered. So I threw that in the microwave when I was done, ate that, and went upstairs and watched some of that blonde dance around. Who cares what the crime show was about? It's like I'm just looking at the eye candy. So it was a good day. Talked to my mom on Mother's Day. Next best thing to being there. Couldn't be there because of the way they're locked down. So all in all, it was a good day. Now I've got a few trying days to go through because of this climate thing, the real climate thing, the global cooling that's going on. So I hope my garden survives, because normally a day like this, normally this time of year, what I would like to be doing, but what I hope I will be doing next week. It's just that, like I say, it's kind of like we skip spring. But as spring comes to an end and summer's nearly here, I'll be out in my backyard messing around with my garden. If I lose these crops over the next 3 days, it's going to be a heartbreaking experience. But I'll just have to replant, or go to the nursery and spend a few bucks and buy some, some things that they've grown in a greenhouse that are, almost at the level mine are now, so that I'm really not that far behind. Worst case scenario. I just like the idea of growing things from seeds, But I have a lounge chair and I've got outdoor speakers and a little workshop, and I'd be sitting there laying in the sun, after I do my yard work or gardening work, and just soaking up the sun in the lounge chair, listening to music. And, if I could be at the beach or like I said, at one of these pools in my mind. You close your eyes and you feel the sun on you. So these are the good old days, if you want them to be. And that's the thing. I cut the cord with the TV, so I don't watch the nightly news. So I don't have that, that stuff eating at me. I quit the politics, the arguments and comments and replies on Twitter, right? So I'm not caught up in that politics as pop culture. I don't get into the cult of personality of these political figures. So I just focus on life and living. And I find that there are things out there that make life worth living and fun. And the only other thing that most people, once you do that, that's a tremendous like burden off of you. You can't realize how much, I know people, how angry people get when they get caught up in this political game and this news, news junkie world where they're bombarding you. The plague's going to kill you, this is gonna, this is it's like, just turn it off, man. Turn it off. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I'll see my doctor. That's how you find out what's going on in the world firsthand. Doctor's probably going to say you should take the thing. I'm going to say, no, man, I don't want it. That's just me. But, I go to the doctor. I already had it. I had the test. I had one of those tests. I tested negative. That's an interesting color that just happened. Be nice if it stayed this way. It won't. So now you can just live life and enjoy. You have to be use your consciousness, the you of you, and plan and define your reality. And find all of the good things that have come from the technology and everything that's come before us and utilize that. But don't take everything that they're throwing at you. You have to it's like separate the wheat from the chaff or something like that. You can't allow them your subconscious mind to make you a subhuman, wherever it is. Cattle. All right. And you can't
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
And you can't get caught up in let their fear mongering. Remember, these are narcissistic sociopaths and psychopaths. It's a corporatocracy, technocracy. It's an organized crime syndicate. Their goal is money and power to rule over you. They have agendas, right? So that they can, they're just sick people. They're sick. They're really sick. They have no empathy. They have no conscience. It's not conscience. They have no conscience, no empathy. They don't care about. They pretend, they talk. Any good sociopath, narcissistic sociopath, even a psychopath, they could pretend, they can mimic that they have feelings and empathy and all that kind of stuff. But they're just they're mimicking it. They're pretending, right? They're trying to because a lot of these people are above average intelligence. So they're it's like the con man type of idea. They're conning you. They know how what they call it, street smarts. That's why I call it an organized crime syndicate, because they're just like a bunch of street smart punks, right? They know how to play the game, right? And they're messing with people. And you have to understand the rules of the game, how it's played. And you have to detach yourself as much as possible. Take the best of what we've got, right? And live your life, the full life, the best you can. Be all you can be, as they say. And you'd be very surprised that at that point, these are the good old days. Because they're the best. This is the best it's going to be. And if you let them rule your life, if you let your subconscious that they are indoctrinating, conditioning, social engineering, if you let that subconscious rule your consciousness, in other words, if you let that perception become your reality, then they win. But if you have your own consciousness, your own mind, and you perceive the world the way it really is, and you could comprehend what I'm saying, right? Use your senses to see things the way they really are. That's the first step for living a full life. See, this whole idea, I repeat this all the time, it's not about surviving through this crazy dystopian nightmare that's unfolding all over, right? This is the former United States. It's not, I mean, come on, they've trampled the Constitution. You think it's going to be saved in the 2022 election or 2024? No. In other words, they've already put the concrete galoshes on, all right? They've cemented this. You know, they have the total control of everything from the courts on down, right? They control the flow of information and everything. So it is what it is. So get out of that scene where you're worried about or concerned about or caught up in, changing things. Don't get stressed out of that. Simplify your life, the best you can. But like I said, survive means thriving, keeping your quality of life. I'm living at what I call the poverty line, literally. But I have my quality of life is improved from when I was making, I don't know, 10 times what I'm making now. My income is now. So how's that possible? Just because I planned it this way. My expenses are less. And I have accumulated enough things that I have, so I don't need to buy frivolous have frivolous expenses. Anyone can do this. It's totally possible. I don't know where my books are. But like I say, I mean, it starts with, this is one of my books. It starts with something as simple as this. Making a monthly budget of every possible thing you spend. And planning, assessing your situation, thinking in the future, looking ahead. About 7 years ago, I looked at my life and I saw that I was spending a couple $1,000s a month in an apartment. And I was thinking, this is unsustainable. Because I was doing work where I was sitting at a computer for 16 hours a day, gaining weight. I wasn't healthy. I mean, it was just, it was a struggle and stress. And I said, no, this is unsustainable. And so I've got to get to a point where I got to cut my expenses way down so I could simplify my life. And I could either live on a limited income and or retire. And it wasn't like snapping my fingers. It was a process. The first thing I had to do is the thing I held up there is, basically assess my everything. Assess the likes and dislikes, the pros and cons of everything, look at my financials, how much was I really spending, what areas could I cut, was I overextended in credit, this, that, the other, and then I started looking for these online real estate places. And I started, narrowing down some properties that were like cheap. And, and like I say, it took time. It wasn't something you do. And then even my planning of moving, I started gradually getting these Walmart plastic, those big plastic containers. They cost back then about $5 or something. Storage container type things, but the plastic ones with the lids. And I started just every time I started getting those. And I just was packing things that I wasn't using into them. To the point of where I finally was living in my apartment with just the essentials. And, and I got closer and closer to the reality that I was going to do this. And then I started the process of closing on a property and, that took time too. That took a couple of months. So it's, you have to be patient and you got to plan, but you got to start somewhere. And then it all came to fruition. And I've been here now for over 5 years, maybe 6, I don't know. But like I say, so it took about a year or so to get, to really, you could do it I've moved around a lot because I've lived everywhere. You could do it in a couple of months if you really wanted to, if you're really organized. I was running a business at the time. I was publishing some things and doing some stuff. So I was involved in a lot of different projects. So I had to, wind down those projects in order to make a move, as opposed to someone with just a job situation or deciding to retire and maybe live off of a gig economy or retirement. So, it's this individual, it's up to the individual. But once you get to that point, and even if you don't move, the moving's not the essential thing. You may be in a situation where you're lucky enough that your cost of living is manageable, that you may just have like your credit bills are a little bit too high or some loans or whatever. For people who are like approaching the age of 62, if you take early retirement, you get less income, from Social Security. But in the long run, you get more, because if you can't retire till 66 or 70, they're pushing the age way back. Eventually, they're going to have it to the point where the average age life expectancy, it's like this plague thing. The average person who died from the plague is the average life expectancy of a human being. Well, the way they want to eliminate Social Security for for the generations coming up, is they're going to have the retirement age be the average life expectancy age. It's like inching up close to it. And so they're not going to get rid of Social Security, but that's how they're going to basically, half the people won't, will never get it. They won't live long enough to get it. Or if they get it, they'll only get it for like a couple of years. That's another reason to survive and thrive, and why I have a garden and stuff. And I've had my share of health problems, which I've talked about many times. But I try to eat healthy and do all that stuff. So if you have a house and your expenses aren't that much, the other thing is that once you're on Social Security, one of the benefits of being on Social Security, any creditor can't collect your money, can't take your money anymore. Social Security is 100% protected. And you could have twice the amount of your monthly Social Security income in the bank at any given time, and it can't be touched, you know. And so, you can just, the way credit card debt, you could just forget about that. Just that's wiped clean once that's another reason to retire at age 62. Just wipe your credit card debt clean. And some people might think, oh, that's like a horrible thing. Not really. If you've had credit cards for, a decade or two, think of the amount of interest you've paid. You've more than paid that. You've paid for whatever you've purchased over those years, 2 or 3 times already. So that's why I say you got to understand the rules of the game and you got to play by them. And that's not being, being weird. It's the same with like when you're at the poverty level, so to speak, that healthcare, you get free healthcare in many states. And some people think, oh, that's like welfare or something weird like that. It's like, not really. I mean, you pay into these things. A guy like me, I got my Social Security number at age 16. So I got my first job, stocking shelves in a Rite Aid store when I was 16 years old. And I worked until recently. I worked my whole life. And so I paid, I paid into the system. I paid unemployment compensation. I paid Medicare, Social Security. That was taken out of my paychecks every year, And, I had some good years of income. And so, it's a matter, it's like that weird commercial with that goofy guy on TV. It's your money, right? And that's the way I look at it. It's your money. And the time between an age 62 and say an age 66 or 60, 68 or whatever, they dangle this thing where they say, oh, you're going to get this much money if you wait till you're 66 or 68 or 70 or whatever. And it's like, no, while you still can retire at 62, retire at 62. Because you may make more money if you wait 5 years or something like that. But if you take the amount of money that you get at 62, times it by 5 years, 60 months, you'll find that that approaches the life expectancy. In other words, you might not ever even achieve that money, that income. So why not take it now? Plus, it gives you the chance of having a quality of life, right? Why slave and ruin your body for another 5 or 7 or for younger people, 10 years, right? Right? Be a waitress for 10 more years because you're going to get an extra $800. Well, what are you going to do with that when you're in your 70s? In your early 60s, you can still do stuff. You see? People don't think about that. I see a lot of people like that. It's like the greed concept that they've like ingrained in people. They think it's the same with people who like don't understand about scaling down your life, even when you're in your 40s, 30s, 40s, even 50s. It's like you can't take it with you. And a line I quote all the time: "The things you own end up owning you." That line from Fight Club. Get what you need to live a good quality of life. And like I've always said before, you'll find that the happiest you've ever been in your life, there's been no things involved in. Think about that. I mean, to get into the, some kind of sexual thing or something, but it really boils down to that. Probably the happiest you've ever been in life has been in bed, with a person, with nothing, no clothes, no technology, just two human beings experiencing one another. Right. Or likewise, maybe you and a person, out, somewhere, the concept of being in love. Does anybody know what that is anymore? Right. So just being with a person, you know, sitting sitting on a bench or in a park or, you know, or a bar or a restaurant or whatever, but not necessarily anything that's super pricey or anything crazy and or technologically or materialistically involved. It's like I say, a child sitting on the floor banging a bunch of pots and pans together is just as happy as a kid, you know, throwing a tablet in front of them and, with some high technology. It's all how it's, in other words, the happiest you've ever been is basically being hugged, being in love, experiencing friendship, companionship, community, for some religion, church, for others, reading a book, laying at the pool or the beach, on the porch during a rainstorm. Think about it. Happiness. That's why I got the smiley faces in the back of that card, the title card of this show. So, yeah, these are the good old days if you want them to be. And don't squander them. The more you are in, experiencing life in its the fullness of life and not caught up in these things that they're trying to mess with your mind from the cradle to the grave. Indoctrination, conditioning, what they call social engineering, and this propaganda, and this idea of politics is pop culture. No, pop culture is fondue. That's why I put the fondue on the title card of this. When the show's over, look at the title card again. All right? Mustache is itchy. Fondue is pop culture, not politics. Right? The cult of personality. No. Cult of personality, if you want to, in the old days, if you want to go to a concert and you can have your little, hero singers or something, I guess. Excuse me. But certainly not a politician. Right? You can't live your life being afraid of catching a cold, germs or something that 99+% of the people didn't die from, just because they're figures lie and liars figure, and they mess with numbers and they show you this big figure, but they forget to tell you that more people die of heart disease every year. So, you have to, your perception is reality, but your perception is being messed with. They're playing games. They know what to do. They're experts at this stuff. They're professionals. They study, the human behavior. The administrators at school, the administration building I talk about all the time, that never existed. All of this technology is brought to you by people not the people who are currently involved. No, they're just sitting around with Starbucks coffee, making 6-7 figures, right? Taking advantage of stuff like people like me. We created this technology, These guys, like I say, this interface that I'm using here on Chrome, YouTube Studio and stuff is primitive compared to what it could be, because I don't think these people they don't know what they're doing. I don't think they have the ability to code this in order to create a picture-in-picture split screen, to put a simple button on the side that you click and it would say, select file, picture-in-picture, and allow the screen to be split like that. I don't think they know how to do that. There's third-party places where you can do this and cloud services and pay these exorbitant fees, But I don't think these people, they're not as smart as you think they are. They're not. It's like I was saying the other day when they use the word reimagined, right? The such and such reimagined. All that means is they stole it from us, something we created 20, 30 years ago, right? Reimagined. They have no imagination. They have no creativity. All they're doing is stealing our old slogans, our old advertisements, our old icons, our old, brands, right? And they're reimagining it, right? You ever notice how many TV shows and movies are just sequels? Some of them have gotten so crazy, it was ridiculous. Didn't they remake Spider-Man within like a 10-year period or something 6 times or something? I mean, that was laughable. But it's all, reimagined. Come on, give me a break. Why don't you come up with a new idea? Yesterday, I gave a great idea for a movie, right? And then a couple of episodes ago, I gave another fantastic idea, for a film. I've got hundreds of ideas for, new TV series and movies and stuff. I'm just not into that anymore. I don't want to write a script. I don't want that. I'm comfortable. Like I say, my quality of life is just fine living this way because I don't have the stress of that. But these people who are pulling down 6 and 7 figures involved in big tech, big pharma, big ag, military contractors, the central banking system, right? The entertainment industry, the media, right? They're all multimillionaires, some billionaires. And and what do? The FDA approves drugs and Food and Drug Administration. And then there's law firms, commercials on TV showing that these things that were approved and then advertised on the media, so the media profited on it too, that these things are being pulled off the market and they caused all kinds of problems. And now there's lawsuits against them. That's not misinformation, by the way. That's fact. All you got to do is turn on the TV. You can't watch TV for more than 15, 20 minutes without seeing on some channel, seeing some kind of law firm, advertisement about something, food or drug that, was approved by the FDA and advertised on TV that now there's a lawsuit, class action lawsuit or some kind of settlement about. No, man. These people, they don't care about you. They don't care about you. That's all you are to them. And simplify your life, you could have a good life, good quality of life. Take an assessment of what you have, and you probably find that you have most of the things you need. And what you don't, get them. And then move towards retiring or simplifying your life or getting to a point where you're not stressed. And if you're comfortable where you are, well, then just cut the cord, man. Get out of this ridiculous, news junkie thing, and politics. That's meaningless. It's not you being in touch with that isn't going to do anything. And don't dare donate to any political campaign or group, action group or organization. That money just goes to TV supporting media, the propaganda industry. It goes to commercials, and those commercials pay the salaries of these people who are lying to you on TV. They lie for a living. See, to them, when there's an event, some kind of tragic event or any kind of thing like that, that's just good content. That's free content for them. That's content to hold people on their channel so they sit through the commercials. And those commercials pay the lifestyle of these people, these news readers and so-called reporters who aren't reporting anything. And that gives them their $1 million salaries. And they all live in these gated communities and are living in this breakaway civilization. And they don't care about anything. They don't care about you. They're living a life that's completely, totally different than your life. So don't be a fool. Don't allow them to control you, manipulate you, and mess with your mind, so to speak. But they're really messing with your subconscious. It's, they're making you perceive a false reality. And you need to have your eyes wide open and figure that out. It's not hard to do. Humans aren't we're not that complicated. Life isn't that complicated. They like to make it seem like, it's, create some kind of whirlwind and get you all in a tizzy, as they say. A ridiculous word. I don't know why it even came to my mind. But that's what it is. But as you systematically just detach yourself from all these diversions, right? Like I say, the witchcraft, the glamour that they're trying to put over your eyes, or the magician's, misdirection, right? Once you like see through that and just get back into touch and live a full life, a good quality of life, and realize that the best times you've ever had have been divorced from this kind of stuff, right? I mean, really the good times. So yeah, these are the good old days. They're the best they're going to be, and it could be better if you want to, but you got to wake up to reality. That's all. The reality, what is really real, right? What is really real? That's what you have to ask yourself. So I think I pretty much, got it, that's it. So,
Elvis has left the building.
So I'm done.
Good night.
I'll talk to you tomorrow. We're getting close to the PhD certificates being handed out. Once we reach 100 of these, we're only days away, literally. I've been doing this nonstop, every day, single day for 100 days. I have a couple hundred videos up, but I've been doing this nonstop for a couple hundred days. So cheers. Have a great week. Hopefully the weather where you are is better than it is here. Cheers.